everybody, welcome back to Let's Talk. My name is John, and today here on the channel, we're going to be counting down the top 10 John Carpenter films and their physical media releases. John Carpenter is one of my favorite directors of all time. He doesn't quite crack the top 5 for me, but he gets pretty damn close. He's made a lot of films that I absolutely love. The only thing I push back against with John Carpenter is he kind of fell off and he stopped directing movies. Really, his career ended in the 1990s. He made 2 films in the 2000s, Ghosts of Mars and The Ward. Both films I really don't like. At least Ghosts of Mars has a good soundtrack and a good score, but The Ward really has nothing going for it. It really feels like a TV film. But John Carpenter, he could not miss in the 1980s in my opinion, and the movies he made in the 1970s are damn good as well. And John Carpenter, for the most part, scores his own films. He knows his way around the synthesizer, and as somebody who loves scores that are Sith heavy, that's just up my alley. And of course, he makes genre films first and foremost. He's not somebody who's ever really crossed over into the dramas that really get noticed by the Academy. He did make one, and it's still got that John Carpenter twist on it, and you'll see that movie on this list. And just remember, guys, this list is just my opinion, so there is going to be one film that I know a lot of people love from John Carpenter that's going to be omitted from my list. But as always, I want to hear your opinion down in the comment section below, and let me know what I got wrong. And without further ado, let's dive right into this list with number 10. And at number 10, I got 1987's Prince of Darkness. Now, this is a movie I had only seen once before this 4K Blu-ray came out, and this is a damn good 4K Blu-ray, as most Scream Factory 4K Blu-rays are. But this one, you know, they're dealing with a green goo, this lime green goo, and that's just going to pop off your screen when you're watching this 4K Blu-ray. This is actually a gift, a Valentine's gift from my wife, so she really knows me. I try and get every John Carpenter movie on 4K Blu-ray, and we've been very spoiled with his films coming to 4K. And, you know, this isn't one of the ones that gets talked about a lot. It has Donald Pleasance, really is the lead of this movie, and a bunch of, like, character actors that you will recognize. Alice Cooper also has a cameo in this movie, and it's a very tension-filled film. I wouldn't say it's one of his scarier movies. It's one of those apocalypse movies, very similar to The Thing. I don't think it's obviously as good as The Thing. I do also feel like the story is a little bit unfocused and can be a little bit confusing. And I think that also kind of works in this movie's favor because it does still feel very down and dirty and gritty like a lot of good John Carpenter movies do. And it obviously doesn't have a very big budget, but for what it's going for, I think the movie nails it. And yeah, I don't have it that high on this list, but I still think it's one that's worth your time because I do think it's very enjoyable. And it's one you should check out around spooky season.
The fog. What you can't see won't hurt you. It will kill you.
And at number 9, this is the one that John Carpenter followed up Halloween with, and we get Jamie Lee Curtis back in one of the leads of this film. But you also have Adrienne Barbeau, who was married to John Carpenter at the time. Tom Atkins, another person who works with John Carpenter a bunch of different times. You also get Janet Leigh, so this is the first time I believe that we had Janet Leigh and Jamie Lee Curtis on film together. And it's basically just a ghost story, and a damn good one at that. Now, this is one that I always just feel like I want to love, but never could quite get to that level. It's one I always really enjoy every time I watch it. I love the special effects in this movie, the way the actual fog looks. Really love that stuff. This 4K Blu-ray is damn solid as well. And another one that was released by Scream Factory. And it's one I'll watch every couple of years. It's not my favorite John Carpenter movie, obviously, but I do feel like it just doesn't quite hit the highs. And, you know, it's a good follow-up to Halloween. He just wants to tell a very simple ghost story, and I think he nails it. And thankfully, this 4K Blu-ray is pretty good as well. And at number 8, I got Christine, which has a really nice 4K steelbook that I really regret not picking up, but the standard edition is still pretty nice. And this is one that actually I've learned to love as time has gone on. The first time I saw this movie, I was probably too young. I thought it was actually really stupid. You know, it's about a killer car. But then when you watch the movie itself and you watch it and you look for the themes in this film about, you know, basically a kid getting bullied, never can rise above a certain level, but this car, it gives him the confidence. The problem is that the car loves him and is going to protect him at all costs. But it's also got a great John Carpenter score. I love the opening credits, seeing this car on the assembly line, essentially the car being born. And then, of course, the great special effects in this movie, seeing the car repair itself.
Okay. Show me.
The way they did that is they just reversed it, which is really, something we just wouldn't do today. If they made this movie today, it wouldn't have the same charm that it does back in the 1980s. It is one of those John Carpenter movies. I can understand why people would say, hey, this is pretty damn stupid. A movie like Rubber takes this to the next level, but I think it is a very interesting film, and if you look at it as a character study, the lead character, even though he's not doing the best job acting, is very interesting. Seeing how his story starts and how it ends in this movie is just as fascinating as seeing a killer car on fire going after people.
What's going on down here? We can't find the damn thing.
And then at number 7, what a lot of people consider to be the first great John Carpenter movie. Not quite a horror movie, this is more of an action thriller that actually got a remake. I prefer the original by a mile. And man, this movie is shocking and violent. You talk about kids getting killed on screen, it's something that's very taboo. You don't see it too much in film. But this movie was doing it back in the 1970s in a really crazy, shocking opening scene in this movie. And the entire movie, you're tense the entire time. Again, another great score in this film. Again, John Carpenter working with a really low budget, but it doesn't feel like a low budget film. A lot of it obviously does take place inside of a police station, probably Precinct 13. And this is just one that I've always enjoyed and just shows that John Carpenter had it really early in his career. And that's what led to one of the greatest films of all time, which we'll talk about in a little while.
We'll drive people crazy. Well, let's hope so. The movie comes out next month.
And then at number 6, I have John Carpenter's definitely most underrated film, In the Mouth of Madness. This is the one that came out in 1994, 1 year after Sam Neill did Jurassic Park. And he gives a better performance in this movie as basically somebody investigating a writer. And then he gets trapped inside one of this writer's stories. And it's a very interesting movie about a man just going insane. No one believes him, obviously. But being trapped inside somebody's stories, it's something we've seen before, but I don't think it's ever been done as good as it's done in this movie. Putting that horror twist on it. It does feel a little bit cheap as far as the cinematography goes. That's one thing I never really loved about this movie. But I think a 4K Blu-ray really could fix all of that. It also has some really scary scenes. This is something that I think is also in that same Apocalypse trilogy as The Thing and Prince of Darkness. So I would say that this is obviously better than Prince of Darkness, but it's still one of those movies that just shows how John Carpenter feels about the world, that we're just heading towards a terrible ending. How we get there, it really depends, but either way, or the ending is going to be the same. We are going to destroy ourselves because of our stupidity. That's what all three of those movies are essentially saying. All three of those movies are very entertaining, very good films, and this movie just really deserves a 4K Blu-ray, and it also needs more eyes on it, and I think a good Scream Factory 4K Blu-ray would do it justice. And this is the one time that a John Carpenter film received an Academy Award nomination. It was for Jeff Bridges in Starman, also starring Karen Allen. And this is a much more dramatic story, a basic alien invasion movie, but really with a heart to it. Jeff Bridges comes to Earth, he finds Karen Allen, a grieving woman, and Jeff Bridges' character starts to morph into her ex-husband, well, I guess her widowed husband, who is Jeff Bridges. And of course, this is him trying to communicate with her. There's a lot of misunderstanding early in this film. Feels like he's kidnapping her, but he just doesn't know any better. And then they start to develop a relationship, not quite a full-blown love relationship, but what they do develop is a close-knit bond. And I'm not going to spoil how the third act of this movie goes, but it does build to a very dramatic conclusion, and it does also feature a scene on a train car that honestly will get me emotionally every single time. The score is right there with this film. This is what I'm talking about with the John Carpenterisms. At least it is a John Carpenter film at its heart. It doesn't feel like he's trying to pan to the Academy. He's still going to have his score in this film. The characters do still feel like they're John Carpenter characters. It doesn't feel like him playing to the Academy, trying to get some Academy Award nominations. It's more John Carpenter showing, hey, I can do these kinds of movies, but I'm going to do it my way. And this is a movie that did receive a 4K Blu-ray upgrade in the Columbia Classics Volume 4 last year. I'm hoping that eventually I get that on 4K Blu-ray on its own. One of the things I hate most is how these movies do get locked behind a paywall with the collections, but I also understand it from a business perspective. But I still would love Starman on 4K Blu-ray. And then at number 4, and I mean, this got really close to number 3 when I was looking at it. So my number 3 and number 4 really can alternate. But at number 4, I have They Live, starring Rowdy Roddy Piper, and obviously his best performance as an actor. John Carpenter getting the most out of him, telling a story that is still very true today, how we are just blinded by consumerism, by the media, by our government, just showing you. But in this movie, the twist is that all those people doing all the manipulating, well, they're aliens, and we can't see them unless you put on these special glasses that Roddy Piper does find. And of course, now he's out there kicking ass and chewing bubble gum, but he's all out of gum. Also features a great performance by Keith David. The fight scene between them two is over the top ridiculous in the best way possible. Another great John Carpenter score. You'll just keep hearing me say that over and over and over again. Builds up to a great conclusion, a very realistic conclusion, or as realistic as a movie like this can get. You know, this is John Carpenter. Again, the cynicism of John Carpenter. He doesn't give you those happy endings. In his mind, there is no happy ending. You can see it throughout in all of his films, and They Live is no different. This might be the most cynical that John Carpenter has ever been. I love this movie, though. Again, you put Rowdy Roddy Piper, a professional wrestler, in the starring role. It only works if John Carpenter has directed it, and I understand that people might not like it because he always makes these genre films. This is an alien invasion movie essentially at its heart, but it just works so well, combining a bunch of different genres. And again, a great 4K Blu-ray. You can check out my full review of that somewhere on the channel. And then at number 3, we have a movie that takes place in the future that is now the past. Escape from New York. This one stars Kurt Russell. Kurt Russell is great as Snake Plissken. I think obviously he's the inspiration for the Metal Gear Solid character, Solid Snake. I mean, that eye patch, the name, the camel pants, it clearly works. He is a prisoner in this movie, and what do they do with prisoners? They send them to Manhattan. That is it. Manhattan Island is completely blockaded off. You go in there, you ain't getting out. There is no way out because they'll kill you on sight. You can do whatever the hell you want in there. There are a bunch of different gangs in there. But unfortunately, what has happened? The President of the United States, Donald Pleasance, has crash landed in there with something that could save the world. He has to get this to a summit. You know, that's our MacGuffin for this movie. So who do they have in there that can help him out? Snake Plissken. So, you know, they say, hey, you got to do this. But of course, they trick him into, if you don't do it, you're gonna fucking die. So he's more motivated than ever to find the president, but he's got a lot of roadblocks in his way, including Isaac Hayes driving around in one of the coolest looking movie cars. New York City, it looks so dirty and gritty in this film. I can see why people might say it looks a little bit cheap. I always have felt like that's part of the John Carpenter charm. A great score as well, arguably his best score. The 4K Blu-ray just adds so much to this film. I do feel like this 4K Blu-ray from Scream Factory, it is the lesser quality of the Studio Canal version that the UK got. I like the artwork more on that, but either way looks great on 4K Blu-ray, and it's a great John Carpenter movie.
He came home.
And then at number 2, we got 1978's Halloween, arguably the movie that made the slasher genre popular. There were slashers before Halloween. You got movies like Peepin' Tom and Psycho, Black Christmas, but really the slasher genre didn't get popularized until 1978's Halloween, made on a shoestring budget with Jamie Lee Curtis in her first role. You get a classic actor in Donald Pleasance in this movie, all just trying to hunt down pure evil, Michael Myers, but in this movie he is just called The Shape. Everybody knows how good Halloween is. Most people would probably put this at number 1. I have one film that I feel like is just better than Halloween, but I cannot take away too much from the legacy that is Halloween. I watch it every single spooky season. It spawned a franchise of films that has been very up and down. You get some classics in there, and then you get some absolute garbage in there. But you can never take anything away from the original, which has received 2 4K Blu-rays, one from Lionsgate, one from Scream Factory. The Scream Factory one, in my opinion, is better, but you know, they both have different color timing, so it really could come down to how you feel. Either way, or that's all you could ever ask for as a physical media collector is options. Like, that's something we don't really get. Or you can buy them both like I did. But let's go on to number 1. And then, of course, in number 1, I've talked about it a million times in the past, we have The Thing, released in June of 1982, the very same month as Blade Runner, Star Trek The Wrath of Khan, Poltergeist, E.T. I mean, what a month if you're a fan of sci-fi horror, because that must have just been eating good in the neighborhood, and it's one of the times I am just so jealous that I wasn't alive and going to the theater back then, because I just can't imagine it. And seeing a movie like this is a film that actually John Carpenter didn't do the score of. He just brought in a little-known composer named Amira Morricone, who's made some of the greatest scores of all time, including the famous The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. He comes in, does a great score to this, to the point where The Hateful Eight actually takes a B-side of this that doesn't appear in the actual film, takes that part of the score and uses it in Quentin Tarantino's The Hateful Eight. So that's how much of an inspiration this score is. It does still feel like a John Carpenter score, so Amira Morricone clearly got the message. In this movie, again, a simple alien invasion movie. A Norwegian team unfortunately dug up an alien that's been buried for years, and it can shapeshift into anything to the point where nobody knows who is the thing. Paranoia is set in. You know, at the beginning, it's the dog. We never know for sure. Nobody trusts anybody, rightfully so, because you really don't know. That manipulation leads to some of the greatest scenes in film history with some of the greatest practical effects in film history. Kurt Russell in the lead role and what I think is his best performance. Keith David again appears in this movie, giving another great performance with so many great character actors. My God. It also has a very good 4K Blu-ray. I've heard some people say this one's not great. I disagree. I think this is a very good 4K Blu-ray that I could definitely recommend. I believe I reviewed this one here on the channel somewhere. Now, the one movie you're going to notice didn't make my list is Big Trouble in Little China, and I feel like that's one that a lot of people love. It's one that I've never truly loved. I really enjoy the movie. I also think it's really cool that we see Deep Throat from the X-Files right at the very beginning of this movie, and Kurt Russell's clearly having a lot of fun. I love the character of Jack Byrne, you know, but if I'm counting down my favorites, unfortunately that would be at number 11. I know that might be crazy to some people who truly love Big Trouble in Little China, and I hear you, but unfortunately for me, that one would be just missing the top 10, and that's also a movie that kind of ruined John Carpenter's career of working with studios because, you know, despite John Carpenter having all these great films, they weren't always received well at the time of release, and they definitely didn't do good at the box office, which is really unfortunate. Really, his career got more noticed in the 1990s after his best work had already come out. He was always recognized for Halloween, but The Thing, Big Trouble in Little China, even Escape from New York, they weren't, or in The Fog, they just weren't loved initially. They didn't get the same acclaim, and they definitely didn't make the same box office, which is really unfortunate because he deserved more. His work deserved more credit and definitely deserved to be noticed more. But now we look back at John Carpenter as one of the greatest directors of all time, rightfully so. He's still working today, not really as a director, but him and his son helped compose the score to Halloween 2018, and I love that score. I listen to it every single spooky season. Really gets me in the mood, so actually listen to that score. Definitely check out the movie, but listen to that score. It's really good. John Carpenter, Cody Carpenter, and I don't remember who the third person was, but it still feels like a John Carpenter score. But guys, I want to hear from you guys. What is your favorite John Carpenter film? What is your top 10 John Carpenter films? Let me know in the comment section below. And while you're down there, don't forget to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, turn notifications on, share this video if you could. We also have channel memberships, so if you want to become a friend of the channel, a producer for the channel, like John Doe Juggalo or Jason Martin, or even a channel director like Frank from Frank's Media and Reviews, and Mr. Smelly Potato, you can do that. Look for all that information in the description below. But if you got no money to throw away, don't you worry about it, guys. We just hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, get out in those streets, tell your friends about us, and then we'll be seeing you around.